No. Thank you. All those in favour? Aye. Sorry, Richard, and that did not eat up any of your 5 minutes, I promise. So you're, the microphone there, if you want to press the button on the right.
I know how it works. Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Richard Brabant. I'm not a member of the trust. I am an Omaha resident. And I'm here to speak for the trust and supported by the Omaha community through the Residents Association because I suggested to the chairman that the time had come where it was necessary to come and see your committee and ask the councillors here to take some action about what's effectively an impasse where council staff have resisted requests to do something so that year in, year out, the dotterels and the variable oyster catchers are not predated and you get the appalling loss of chicks that's been happening for some years now. Now, I provided a submission, and I know that councillors are often busy, don't get the chance to read that. It's in the attachments, and I've got a PowerPoint here which just takes us through some places. So that's the location of the Shorebird Sanctuary. It is a council reserve, and therefore the council has obviously a responsibility for it. The trust are volunteers who really do all of the work at the sanctuary. They do the traps, they do the monitoring, they download the unending pictures of cat predation from the cameras. And one of the reasons that we're here is a request that the council actually do something that will improve or actually deal with the situation that we have. The Trust's mission is particularly to protect the northern New Zealand dotterels and their variable oyster catchers. The agenda item indicates the status of the birds and what the situation is, including the data of loss of chicks year in, year out that's been happening before the Trust approached the local board in 2021 and asked for help. That's the information that's in the agenda, and you can see this last breeding season that's just finished, 1 chick fledged out of 20 breeding pairs, but the catastrophic losses have been happening for some years before that. The variable oyster catcher, as it says there, very few chicks survived to fledge. That's just a little cute picture. There, the dotterel and the chick on the beach, it's vital for their fledging that they have free and unimpeded access to the shoreline. They aren't fed by the parents. They need to be able to move freely between nest and the water's edge, and that's one of the reasons why, as a third issue, I've raised the urgency of changing the status of this reserve so the council is in a position to close the reserve to public access during the breeding season, which can't be done at the moment. Variable oyster catcher and chick. So these are the 3 critical issues, and I've talked about them in the document I sent in. And they're in order of importance, although I'll say something about item 2 in a minute. Obtain a necessary coastal permit consent and complete an extension of the existing predator fence. So a predator fence was put in 2012. The Auckland Council organised the planning application, which I knew about at the time, and was astonished to see that it didn't include a request for a coastal permit that would take the fence through to the low water market in the inner harbour, and I'll talk to you about that in a minute. Then there's a question of whether or not there's live cat capture. As the documentation and the evidence shows, this is not a widespread problem throughout Omaha with people looking after their cats properly. There are 3 identified cats that have been treating the beach and a gully up into the sanctuary as a highway to come in and out as they please for years. There are numerous photographs, and I've got a few in the material showing how they access. I went down there on Tuesday with Dennis O'Callaghan, who's here, one of the, well, he does regularly the trapping. He showed me a security camera on a gully the cats come up, and told me that they had a live cage in there for cats, and I asked him how many cats were caught, and he said never, not one. It's very difficult to live capture them, and it only reinforces the need to extend the predator fence so that cats can't get in the first place. And the third item there is the status of the Omaha Shorebird Reserve being changed. Now here's the fence at low and high tide. It's a little bit harder to see on the top photo, but that gives you an idea of the amount of shoreline at low tide. And then there's another photo at high tide, and just beyond the fence there, you can see a set of steps. The solution here, and I say this with the knowledge of having done coastal permit work in my professional life for many years, including for Far North Holdings Limited, which did all the structural consenting for Far North District Council. There are competing values always where a structure is going to go below the district. And those competing values here are access as opposed to wildlife values. And what's needed is an application for a coastal permit, which will be dealt with by an independent panel, and they will make a decision as to how to weigh up those panels. Instead, the council are on record through its staff as saying the council will never extend it. So I know my time will be up already because 5 minutes is short, but I want to ask that the resolution here is not a resolution just to receive and thank for what's happened or what I've been able to say and present to you. I'm looking for the councillors here to take some positive action and direct the staff to take steps to do something about this predator fence. Otherwise, the whole point of a sanctuary and the investment that's been made to date is going to be a continued wasted exercise. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Kia ora, thank you very much. There's a few questions, but I am adding an additional resolution to refer it to the Chief of Strategy to further investigate, but on public forum we can't make further decisions on understanding orders, so we can't list a number of things that we would like to do. And both Councillor Sayers and I have met with staff recently looking through the myriad of things that could be done and are an issue, and why we obviously it's difficult to trap cats that are microchipped or owned, or those. We're looking at all those sorts of things, but obviously it comes with difficulties. There'll be a few questions and then we could have a bit of discussion at the end. Councillor Watson and then Councillor Sayers.
Yeah, thanks for your presentation. Very good, and I'm familiar with this part of Omaha. And that's a bit of a revelation actually in terms of what's happening to the oyster catchers and the dotterels, because you see the predator-proof fence and you assume everything's okay. So you have a very holiday-oriented catchment there in terms of people that are living. So often it's holiday homes in that part of Omaha that abut that. In respect of the existing fence and then access, most people come to Omaha, go to the other part of the beach. Of course, they don't come there. So it's a very identifiable area with some clear solutions to the current impasse. Then, isn't it? Like it's not a big imposition on the public as such, and you have an existing facility that is meant to do what you're proposing, but it isn't. So I'm kind of curious why there'd be such a level of opposition or difficulty dealing with, in effect, a failing status quo.
Okay. Well, the first thing is, of course, there's a high property ownership, people who come up there on weekends and sometimes longer, but there is a growing permanent resident population, and actually Eleanor and I are part of that at the moment. We've been living there for nearly a year. But this is this picture here shows people coming in to the reserve. So we get holiday makers. I mean, Omaha gets inundated, particularly during the summer, with people coming to the beach for the day. Now, there is a gate in through the predator fence. These people have come in through the predator fence. You'll see one of the photos of them in there with their dogs, which of course dogs are not meant to be there. If people want to get in, they don't need to walk along the edge of the harbour, John. They can come in through the main fence. The reason for these photos is to show you the problems with not having a protected reserve status so that you can actually exclude people. These people are here at the critical period when the young chicks and their parents are trying to get down to the beach. But we get back to the point that it was obvious to me, in an area where I have some expertise, that the predator fence was deficient from day one. If you were a farmer putting a stock fence in, you would put the fence down, as they do, to low water mark, so the stock can't walk around the end. And there are photos within this submission of mine. You can see them there taken at night of these cats, and you can see them walking right by the fence. I mean, that's the way they come and go. And I never got the chance to say, John, but the other thing is, I have mentioned cage trapping is probably going to be ineffective. It is at Tāwhanui, but I know how they do it there, and it's quite different. One thing the council staff could be doing is taking an active role in talking to the owners of these cats. It's been left to the local residents and volunteers to go and speak to the owners. They live at 281 Omaha Drive. I've got a picture on my phone of where they live. It's no secret in our community that two of the cats come from there, and the volunteers have gone and spoken. So I'm asking, why aren't staff at an official level, you know, the uniform? If this was dogs, it wouldn't happen like this. You've got a whole dog control system with people who do things, you know, just if dogs bark. And no one from the staff has been interviewed and spoken to these people about the situation. So that's why I'm here, to say, please, we need a shake-up here. We need the fence extended. It's such a waste of an investment in the rest of the fence not to put another 20 metres in to do the job properly.
Kia ora. Thank you. Councillor Sayers.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And through you, I'd like to first of all just acknowledge the work of these volunteers. I think we've all got a pretty good impression of what they've done. And also just want to thank Richard and his team for the travel that they've made to get here today. I had a couple of questions for Richard, one around the reserve and one around the fence. With the reserve, that status of that change, you know, we want to get on the land there, because if we've got a protected reserve and there'll be nothing to protect in another year, so the status of that, from your knowledge, are you able to update us at all where that's sitting in terms of your understanding of the process to date?
Thank you, Councillor Sayers. The chairman of the trust, Chris Allen, who's here behind me, is more au fait with this than me, but I did make a submission for Omaha residents and separately the trust did about status, and one of the problems is that the boundaries are wrong. So some of the Omaha North Reserve is shown at the moment as being an Esplanade Reserve, so there's a boundary issue, but it needs, my understanding is it needs to have its status changed to what's called a protected reserve status. And I didn't look all this up before I came because I figured that actually that's something the staff can deal with. I don't think there's a contest that something needs to be done, so there is the ability to shut the reserve at critical periods. It's just that nothing's happening. It needs to be moved on. But of course, changing the status won't do any good if the fence isn't extended. I hope it's obvious to everyone that they've got this terrible situation with how you deal with cats, and the way the reserve, the pest management plan is written, there are serious difficulties. So if you can't capture them, then what do you, and people won't keep their cats in, what do you have to do? Make best use of a predator fence, which is what we can't do at the moment.
So, thank you. And I think it's very helpful. Your presentation has been extremely helpful, hasn't it, Richard, in terms of our discussions with staff, and I'm sure it's giving them some much more tangible actions that they can follow up on. Particularly even just going around talking to the owners, the council staff in their uniform, you know. So my second question was targeted around the fence, Richard, and that's in terms of might be calling on your expertise that you've had, you know, with the resource consenting in the past. So my understanding is that that consent has never been applied for, and the costing to run that fence, that extra 20 metres, has never been done. And I think you'd be asking for both of those things, for some action to happen quickly on both of those. So is that correct in terms of your understanding about the fence?
Well, one of the trust members who's an engineer has drawn up a design. I mean, I'm sure Mayor Brown could as well. It's a pretty simple post wire mesh. You know, that there's nothing magical about what needs to be done to do it. And I imagine it hasn't been costed, because the council's position, as recorded in the Maharangi Matters front page paper, is the council will never do anything about extending the fence. And as I said in my material, it's not the place of council staff to decide whether the council will make an application to extend a predator fence. That's a decision for councillors to make. And the next thing is, the way in which to deal with whether or not a fence should be there is through the consenting process, where people can come along and have their say, and an expert committee makes the decision. So it's not for biosecurity experts to decide that there's an interference with public access, which means a fence shouldn't be done. Their role is to look after biosecurity matters. So we've got wildlife values on the one hand, and public access along the foreshore on the other. And this is nothing new. These issues and tensions often arise, and they have to be balanced up and weighed. And there's an obvious mitigation on access, which is another set of stairs, because there's one there already, and a gate. So, I mean, I know how to do an application like this. I know the expert reports you'd need. I know the people the consultants in Orewa who've done a lot of work, either gratis or at a heavy discount, to provide expert plans, so you don't employ expensive Auckland consultants. I mean, you need a navigation report. I mean, it's not a difficult application. And it's something that could be, the breeding season starts in September. And if I may be permitted to say so, if I'd been asked to do this job, I could get this consent through by September. The local iwi, the local authority, the whole Omaha community will support this application being made. And all it's needed is someone to get started before another round of breeding and more birds are killed.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Richard. Chair, and just in terms of that recommendation that referring it to Megan to have further investigation on it, I think it's pretty clear that there's a high degree of frustration that there's not enough momentum, and I guess a fear that things won't happen quickly enough that need to be followed up on. So I'm just wondering if that could be tightened up a little bit more, where those findings from the Chief of Strategy, once she's had a chance to go through that, gets reported back either directly to myself, that I can go back to that community, or back to this committee, just so, and even if there's a time, I don't know if we could put a time frame on it, but I'm just trying to make it measurable and make sure that the actions are followed through in a prompt way. Is there anything you could commit to there, Megan, for us?
We could probably add report back to this committee, but putting a time frame on it is not. Yeah, I think this has been obviously brought to me by yourself, and I'm keen personally to take this up in a stronger way. The request for a change of use of the reserve hasn't come to, as far as I know, come to this committee before. So these are obviously local board delegated reserves and projects, so we need to work with them for, to work out the delegations around that, because we can't just propose or impose these sorts of things. So the local board I'm not sure if they've requested that of us in the past, but we need to work with the
I
local
think they'd
board.
be cooperative, Richard, and maybe they just need our help.
Yeah, absolutely. I just don't want to pretend that right now we have that delegation, so we need to come from the local board, and we will work around all of that now that we are very aware of this issue. Cool. Thank you.
I see those changes there, thank you.
Thank you, councillor. Member Ashby.
Thank you for the presentation. Just two questions from me. One is, are the groups that you're representing, have they spoken with Ngāti Manahiri about this? I presume they'd be pretty well aware of the issue.
Thank you. I can't answer that specifically. What I do know is that there is regular ongoing contact with Ngāti Manahiri. In fact, I work on the golf course and I had one of their team out in the last couple of weeks dealing with a tree issue, which is what I look after on the golf course. So what I can't tell you specifically, have they spoken about this, but there is a close association and an ongoing one, and that's why I felt able to say that I'm sure that they would be supportive of the protection needed of these wildlife values.
Thank you. And the second question was just, clearly there's an issue here. There's also an issue with cats in the coastal environment around the region, and I'm mindful there's a similar issue at Stillwater and Okura where there's a marine reserve, and we're trapping stoats and possums, but the cats just wander in and pick up a chick and wander home again. So you talked about the RPMP and the, I guess, the gaps that has when it comes to cats, which I've also run into. I was just wondering what, in your view, would help plug this gap?
Microphone.
Sorry.
Richard.
The first thing is I know algae space, snails, they've got the same problem with cat predation at all of those places. And I obviously would support something being done there too. What we know at Omaha, it so happens we've got 9/10 of a fence, and we have the ability there to do something effective for those birds. But if you turn to the regional pest program, I did include the section on what are called unowned cats. I have to start by saying there's no such word as unowned, and the definition in the plan is dreadful, because if you were to capture a cat inside this reserve, you're meant to, for it to be unowned, is it microchipped? How do you know that? Has it got a name and address on a collar? Well, that's a possibility. But then as well, to qualify for being owned, it has to be registered on a national register. And how could you possibly find that out? Capture the cat. And then the next question is, are you in a rural area? So I had an interesting discussion with one of the staff at Biosecurity yesterday about, I asked him, is Omaha a rural area? And he said, oh, well, no, it's not. And I said, well, I don't know about that. We're on rural delivery. It's a coastal settlement. It's outside the rural boundary. I only say those things because I think even the definition is problematic. But I've referred in my submission to the objective and the outcome, if you like, the policy, the objective and the policy. And in this case, letting these cats continue to predate these birds is contrary to the objective and the policy. So how do you deal with that? If the cats are doing things that are contrary to the objective and policy, how is it then that the staff advise the people at Omaha that they can't do anything? Because again, with cats, it's a matter of balancing wildlife values against, to be blunt, the cat's life. And that's got to be weighed up somehow. And if the effects become too great, you have to deal with the situation. And as I mentioned before, we have this curious situation of a whole staff employed by this council and other councils that deal with dog problems. But there's no mechanism or method by which this situation is being effectively dealt with.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree. I'd probably take a more permanent solution myself, but thank you.
Thank you, Member Ashby. Mayor Brown.
Thanks for the presentation. I've got a question. I'm not sure whether the staff should answer this or not, but if these were dogs killing Kiwis, we'd have killed the dogs. What is it about cats that get such special ability to go out and decimate our wildlife?
There is legislation around dogs. There is no legislation around cats.
Well, maybe we should be asked for some. Can we pass our own legislation around cats?
We have the regional pest management plan, and just very high level, there was a very controversial process around cats because we obviously were capturing cats through the regional pest management plan in places like Tawhanui, Shakespeare, things like that. We almost didn't get that far. There was a lot of kind of opposition at the time. That has to go through a very clear legal process, and we're obviously we are starting to review the regional pest management plan again soon. On the legal approach, I believe the last Minister of Conservation was looking at a legal approach on cats, so we can once again ask for that sort of guidelines or legal approach by the new minister. But at the moment, we can control dogs and capture dogs and things like that, but on cats, especially those who are not identified as having owners, which is the case at Omaha, it is far more complex around property laws and around, so it is not an easy situation to deal with this.
Well, it's easy to understand, and if it's in other places as well, it's time we deal with it. When I was the mayor up north, we managed to get rid of a lot of cats from a lady in Paihia who was causing much the same thing. And there was no bird life in Paihia, and now there is. And I know at the time the cat army, I got threats of death from the cat army in America. Fortunately, though, Americans didn't know where New Zealand was, so it was cat ownership seems to be some sort of a mental disease. But we need to deal with this because we're no shortage of cats, but we'll run out of wildlife at some stage. So can I encourage you to take a more active approach when we do our pest management definitions. In the meantime, I'm quite happy to support the B there that we push the review of this fence, but I'd rather just kill the bloody things, really.
Mr. Chairman, may I be just permitted to respond on these issues? So,
Yes, just briefly. We will have to move on because
if I read for Mayor Brown, there's a caption over the top of the section in the pest program, and the last sentence says, having talked about the damage cats can cause, however, cats are also New Zealand's most popular companion animal, and Auckland Council recognises the need to balance wildlife protection with protection of companion animal values, whatever that means. And then in this Maharangi Matters, the Council's Biosecurity Principal Advisor, Imogen Bassett, is quoted as saying, trapping or shooting the cats is not an option because they are likely to be, quote, much loved family pets. Now, that's the sort of problem that is being faced in dealing with these cats at the moment. The debate is stopping at those sorts of emotive statements and not dealing with the subsequent provisions in your plan that require a balance between wildlife values and what the cats are doing. So we're not getting to it. You're not getting to address the damage that's being caused because everything's stopping up.
I get
this
it,
companion value stuff.
I get it. All the dogs we kill are much loved animals as well, of course. Even if they've bitten somebody.
We'll try not to debate back and forth, and I can tell you that Imogen and others are very passionate about this issue, and they were on the receiving end of death threats about protecting wildlife and capturing cats a number of years ago. So we need to, it's always about making sure we have the legal abilities and take the community with us. There's no more questions, but I just want to acknowledge the frustration and also the significant amount of work all of you are doing to protect the dotterel and the other species in that area, and we do need to work, and thank you, Councillor Sayers, for bringing all this clear information to myself, Imogen and others, to how we can address this. We clearly need to work with the local board because any of the changes you're requesting would be technically up to them, but we need to work with them to see what is possible. But I just want to thank you again for all your work, and it has made a difference despite your frustration of cats obviously undermining a lot of that work as well. So, kia ora. Right, all those in favour? Oh. Oh, right, sorry. Councillor Darby.
So, thank you, Richard. I wasn't going to ask any questions, but you've articulated it well. And I'm following on the point of the Mayor, really. And just to declare, I have a property where if a cat comes onto my rural property and it finds a trap, it's dead. Along with the stoats, along with the possums, along with the rats, it's on the list. And there's a program to eradicate. Now, I've only once ever caught a domestic cat, but it was 1.8 kilometres from its home. I've caught feral cats, quite a few. But I'm coming to our situation in Auckland. That's not in Tamaki, that's somewhere else I'm referring to. But this is a much bigger problem. This is a localised problem and one we need to look at. But we've got a situation in Auckland where last night probably thousands of native birds were destroyed. Thousands. It would have been, and look, Environmental Defence Society, Greenpeace and many others have done lots of work on this. If we're reviewing the pest management plan, if it's coming up, I think we should make sure that we reference that and refer this sort of localised work to that review. And we're all going to have some grit when we go to that review and remember these instances, because the issue with domestic cats wandering is huge and it is destroying the native bird life of Tamaki Makaurau. It is phenomenal. We have to take that on. I've just had a brief look at the animal management bylaw. I think it was tweaked in 21. It's dated 2015. And if you look at it, it's all about the impact on human beings and nothing about the impact on the natural environment. It's all about us rather than nature. And I think that's a major error. We've missed the plot. We've missed it. You know, we've got some fundamental things to address here. So I know the chair of Regulatory, Councillor Bartley, is on this call. I think there is a discussion to be had at the Regulatory Committee because that animal management bylaw is the domain of that committee. We've got subsets of that animal management bylaw, dog bylaws. We prohibit roosters in residential areas because they upset people. We've got rules about horses. We've got rules about all kinds of animals where they impact human beings, but very little in the way of teeth where the impact is on the nature of Tamaki. And we've got work to do. I think while I acknowledge Richard's and the group's work today, and we can address that as a localised thing, we need to take that and talk to all the other groups that have the same problem. Domestic cats wandering 1.8 kilometres from home and taking out a couple of birds, native weta, native lizards, all in one night, and trundling home at 5 a.m. and having a good nod off for the rest of the day. And they're beautiful, cuddly animals. I think we've got a fundamental problem that we have to address.
Thank you, Councillor Darby. I let you speak, but we actually don't allow, we're not supposed to allow debate on public input, but I thought you didn't get a question, so
No, it's a motion, and you can actually speak to a motion.
No, not public input. But yeah, but I think we got, definitely understand your position there. All those in favour? Any opposed? No. Thank you. Right, we'll move to the next public input. Thank you, Richard. We have Nathan Turner and Nisha Chowdhury from Blue Float Energy. Thank you.
Kia ora, good morning. Thanks for having us here today. My name is Nathan. This is my colleague Nisha, and we represent Blue Float Energy. Okay, so why are we here? I'm sure I don't need to tell this committee that global warming is marching on. On some accounts, last year, 2023, was the first year in which we hit that milestone of 1.5 degrees above pre-industrial levels that we've been trying to avoid for so long. But of course, this committee recognised climate emergency all the way back in 2019, 5 years ago, so that will be no surprise. Now, as a country, we have, of course, made international commitments about this, including to be at net zero by 2050, amongst others. But guess what? We are way off track as a country to meeting those commitments, based on what international monitors are observing, and even based on our very own Climate Change Commission's advice to the government. Now, I think there's very little understood about what it takes as a country to get to net zero by 2050. In the energy industry, there's a number of oft-quoted reports which refer to electrification as the big opportunity, and I think there is absolutely no doubt that electrification will play a big role. But on this screen here, I extract a modified version of a chart which features in a report from Transpower a couple of years ago. And it shows that electrification contributes only about 1/3 of the emissions reduction that we need to get by 2050. If you assume that planting hundreds of thousands of hectares of forests can contribute another 1/3, then we still have a very large challenge to abate that last 20 million tonnes per annum of emissions that we're currently emitting into our atmosphere as a country. Now, the Auckland Council, of course, has a climate plan which seeks to address some of these issues within the Auckland region itself, and I've extracted just a few of the key actions from that plan. Items 1 through 6 are all absolutely valid things that we need to be progressing, but of course they all result in an increase in electricity demand within this region, largely because many of those actions result in moving away from fossil fuel consumption into an electricity-based system. Now, it's great that item 7 there from your report talks about supporting the installation of renewable energy in Auckland, and I think that's the key point that I want to pick up on in the presentation today. Now, not only is more green power very important to achieve emissions reduction within Auckland, but it's also really important from a pricing and a business perspective. That there is the current chart of Auckland power prices for 2024, 2025, 2026, 2027, if you go into the market and try to hedge your costs today. $185 a megawatt hour for 2024, more than double the long-term average. And for 2026 and 2027, Auckland will be paying a 33% premium on wholesale power prices compared to the South Island. So this is not only an issue about decarbonisation, it's also an issue about attracting and retaining business and ensuring that we have a resilient energy supply for our city. So what do we need? Well, we need a lot more renewable energy, and we need some of that to be proximate to the biggest load centre in this nation, which is the Auckland City region. And hence why I thought it was very important to share with you the project that we are working on. So Blue Float Energy is a global developer of offshore wind projects. We're working on projects in 11 countries around the globe at the moment, including 2 right here in New Zealand. One of those projects is, please forgive the name, the Waikato Offshore Wind Project. But importantly, one of the connection options that we're investigating is within the South Auckland region at Glenbrook, where there is a Transpower substation co-located with the New Zealand Steel plant. Now, phase 1 of that project, 54 large offshore wind turbines, 22 kilometres off the coast, would have a peak capacity of 810 megawatts. That's 50% of the total peak capacity in the Vector network today. So this can have a material impact on the electricity supply for Auckland, not only for our demand today, but for the growing electricity demand that this city will have through its decarbonisation efforts. Blue Float's working with a local partner, Elemental Group, who's been a long-standing player in the energy system based in Taranaki. And so we're bringing together those local and global capabilities to develop this project. Now, offshore wind has been operating for more than 30 years globally, but is brand new for New Zealand. MB is working on an enabling regulatory framework right now, which is expected to be introduced as new legislation later this year. If that happens, we're hoping to receive feasibility permits in 2025, which would allow us to undertake the necessary site investigation works to mature our project. In addition to delivering the large power for Auckland and the decarbonisation benefits, there's obviously a significant amount of local supply chain and employment opportunities that would come from this. But I think most importantly, as I said before, this is not just a story about decarbonisation, but ensuring that we have affordable and secure and resilient electricity supply for the Auckland region, which all of our great businesses depend on as well. So this is normally the point in a meeting with someone like a council where people say to me, well, what do you want? What do you need from us? And I think the really key opportunity that I want to bring to the council's attention is that not only is the council a significant buyer of electricity today, but if the council carries on with the excellent work that it's doing to electrify its public transport fleet, to decarbonise its venues and other facilities such as water care operations, etc., the council will become a very, very significant procurer of electricity in the future. Now, the council has a unique opportunity here to aggregate that electricity demand, and rather than going to energy retailers and buying power 1 or 2 years at a time, to look for projects in the Auckland region, sign long-term power offtake contracts to incentivise specifically the development of large-scale renewable energy in the Auckland region. That would be very powerful in bringing this new generation to market, and the council could do so strategically, picking the projects that would have a greater benefit for the Auckland city. We would also encourage the council to support the government to carry on with the enabling regulatory framework to ensure these projects can progress. There is a certain amount of clarity required in the consenting framework, given that these projects will be largely based in the exclusive economic zone, but also come in through territorial waters and into the RMA zone. And finally, I think there is a real opportunity here for council to work with developers to design these projects in a way that suits the city's needs. We have choices to make around where O&M bases are located, where port facilities are located, where transmission infrastructure is located, and all of those decisions could be made in a much more beneficial way if done with the council's input. I'm going to pause there. Thank you for your attention, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Kia ora. Thank you very much for the clear presentation. Member Ashby.
Thank you for the presentation. Just one question from me. What relationship, if any, or engagement have you had with iwi about these plans?
Thank you. Yeah, so within the Auckland region, we're working very closely with Ngāti Te Ata. Their environmental manager is carrying out a cultural impact assessment for us right now, and we have also invited them to participate in the design of our environmental survey program, which they are doing, and we greatly appreciate their support in that regard. Of course, our project also extends further south into the Waikato region, so we're also engaged with Waikato Tainui and a number of the coastal hapu along that area, including Ngāti Tahinga and the Whaingaroa Moana Collective based in and around Raglan. Thank you.
Kia ora. I think that's probably all the questions. Just essentially, you've said you've said what we can do, but is there a clearer piece on how we can help from a non-regulatory point of view? Obviously, if you apply for something in our jurisdiction, that just goes through the normal process. But yes. I guess, is it good to meet with myself and Councillor Bartley who chairs Regulatory Committee to kind of understand the process in the intermediary phase, or is it best for us to stay out of that process?
No, I think it would be helpful to explore that further, but I guess, similar to the gentleman who presented before me, I guess I would really encourage the committee to think about whether or not some staff within council could be encouraged to pick this up as an action to explore, as I said, how the council might be able to think about using that procurement power as a tool to promote new investment in renewables in the region. We have had some initial engagement with senior council staff, and the impression I get that they would appreciate some direction, that this is a priority for the council to be pursued and explored further. And so if the committee were willing to make a recommendation of that nature, I'd certainly support that as well.
Most definitely, thank you. I know that our Climate Connect group in Tātaki, Auckland Unlimited, are also working on solar in small scale and potentially large scale stadiums and things at the moment, but wind is not, hasn't crossed my desk
right.
yet on how that would work on a
That's right.
Auckland-wide basis.
I mean,
but
there are plenty of small-scale, diversified renewable options within the Auckland region. There are very few options to build large-scale renewable energy like this. It's quite a unique opportunity within Aotearoa.
Kia ora, thank you very much. We have just the same resolution, and feel free to contact myself and Councillor Bartley personally, and we can set up a meeting to understand in more detail. Good. Councillor Baker, I'll second. Oh, did you have a question? Sorry. Yeah.
I was going to say that you might like to contact me as well. I mean, I was involved in setting up the one in Wellington on the hills.
Excellent.
I know exactly how you connect and all the things that go wrong. It was a good presentation. Well done.
Thank you.
Good. Thank you, Mayor. Right, all those in favour? Any opposed? Thank you very much for
Kia ora, thank you.